What are China's plans when it comes to the International Organization for Mediation, or IOMed as they're calling it? What are the implications, the ramifications of such an organization? Can China really be a peacemaker? Joining me in an exclusive conversation on our global network is Howard Zhang, senior China analyst, former chief editor of BBC News Chinese. Howard, thank you so much for joining us over here. How do you think the West, particularly the United States of America, but largely the West, is looking at this development, given that this certainly is aimed at and is targeting the West when it comes to China trying to be peacemaker?
Exactly. And first of all, this is no, I guess, new move. It's a continuation of China's strategy of going after what they so-called global South. And back in Beijing, and documents after documents show that the Communist Party leading the country realized they're in a fight with U.S.-led the West, and their conclusion is the current world order needs to be reset into what they called a multipolar world. And hence, if they cannot win over the leading Western nations to their sphere of influence, then the only way is to broaden their foothold in the global South. And this is just another step in the diplomatic as well as the more geopolitical kind of play, trying to win over as many as possible and also to broaden China's influence.
Well, interesting, because there are countries that are joining in, but with China herself involved in so many disputes, how can then Howard China really play peacemaker?
I guess it's using a word recently used by the British Prime Minister Starmer. This is going to be a coalition of the willing, and China, possibly whoever is pushing for this initiative, understands it is unlikely at the very beginning to have any heavyweights from the West, not even its neighbors like India or any of the other countries. But it's gotten some Southeast Asian countries. It's gotten Pakistan, and even a European nation like Serbia. So there's some voices, dissenting voices from the fringe of the mainstream global order that's willing to join China. And so at least China now gained some influence, at least from its own calculation, in the mediation sphere.
Well, but again, Howard, I'd like to ask you, China itself is involved in disputes when it comes to Taiwan, the South China Sea, including a dispute with India. In such a scenario where they themselves are caught in so many problems and disputes, how can they be mediators?
Well, that's I guess, a matter of perspective. It's the same thing as, when we talk about the Ukraine war, and Russia will have a different perspective than many of in the rest of the world. Rest of the world would see this as an invasion, and Russia would see themselves as defending their own interest. So that's the difference in perspective. The same thing here in the from the Chinese side, especially the current ruling party side, they are trying to fight their corner and fight a way out in the current unjust world order. At least the world order is not giving the due respect to China. So in a way, if the current order is not tolerating China's what they consider legitimate voice and existence, then they have to fight their own corner and get their own voice heard. So whether this is they themselves are involved in so many disputes and border-wise and otherwise, that's another matter. For them, they just need their voice and influence to be heard, and that's why they're basing that in their own territories. And they got enough member to join to have a
Exactly.
start.
Exactly, Howard. More than 30 countries joining China is also telling story. It tells the world that no matter what you say that you're trying to isolate China, China is not isolated here.
Well, again, it's a matter of perspective. And in the broader sense, if we talk about the mainstream countries, and there's still a lot more countries who are when push comes to shove, will have to align themselves with US and Europe and the rest of the bigger economies and the political forces. But of course, China has gotten a foothold. And even during, I guess, if we look back at history, even during the Cold War in the 60s and 70s, when China was a lot more isolated than today, they still had, quote unquote, friends in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa. So this Go Global South strategy, it's just a modern day version of how do you deal with when you are pressed against a war in so to speak, when the U.S. is pursuing what they call the strategic rivalry, and China sees their, some officials even described as their, neck being ringed and their bottom line being really, really threatened.
Well, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with influence. A lot of it has to do with arm twisting when it comes to China. But they have shown that they can bring these many countries together. The geopolitics of the world is changing. It's not like countries are actually listening to America like they did in the past. So this is not the Cold War era. Look at the kind of cooperation Russia and China have. How disturbed would the West be in such a scenario? Or do you think these are just early days and that this is just wishful thinking by Beijing?
I think many in the decision-making circle in the West and people you engage with, they're really worried about the current Chinese what they describe as an aggressive push all around the world. But of course, the most immediate worries many of them have is the how the current U.S. administration is going about trying to reset orders in the world as well. So many, if you look at just north of the border from the U.S., the Canadians are not very happy with what Donald Trump's government's doing to their country, or at least making open threats of takeovers. And at the same time, there are lots of countries still fall within the current, what you call it, the Western order, but are not very happy with how things are going. And hence you see a European nation, Serbia, albeit on the fringe of Europe, but nonetheless trying to have a European membership, European Union membership. But Serbia now signed up with the Chinese mediation panel. That's an expression of discontent, at least to say the least, with the current existing European side of things, as well as the international tribunals.
Right, but is there going to be a pushback? Like, are we looking at China creating this alternative after the conversations they've had and ensured a Saudi Arabia-Iran peace deal, although it's not completely there yet? But the fact that they can do so much, that they're having conversations with the Taliban to normalize, stabilize the country in Afghanistan, that they continue to have conversations in Myanmar, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka. In such a scenario, is there going to be a pushback?
The pushback is constant, but perhaps not in the most immediate way people can see. And the U.S. Just over the past few days have decided to revoke all the student visa, most of the student visas of Chinese origin in the U.S. There's lots of new sanctions, such as on terms of sales of sensitive materials, silicon chips. So that type of, I guess, not so direct sanctions and pushbacks are constant. It's action reaction. And I guess like Indians will know the concept of karma better than anybody else. So there is a constant struggle in this world now, action reaction. And so the new world order is being reset, whether we like it or not. So China is doing its bit, trying to carve its corner. And the backdrop is many other parties and powers are pushing back as well.
Right, before I let you go, Howard, it's not just being reset. The global order is also being challenged. That China thinks the global order works in a manner that is akin to thinking America, walking America, talking America, that China does not need to follow, or the world does not need to follow exactly what they think is right or wrong. And with Trump coming in and completely disrupting what the world order looked like, it seems like China does have a window to say, well, you can make massive turnarounds, U-turns, and we all should sit and keep accepting your changed world order. That's not going to be the case.
It is true. It is true to a certain extent, but at the same time, we cannot be naive because what the Chinese Communist Party is pushing is slightly different from, however much we dislike the disruptive behavior of lots of the new policies coming out of the White House, and what China has in plan is slightly different from the rule of law plan that people are actually used to in the current world order.
Right, Howard, how do you read and what do you make of the position that Trump administration has taken when it comes to Chinese students, Chinese working over there, so on and so forth, if I may just ask?
The official excuse is they're worried about spying and, things of that nature. But deep down, I guess I have my personal suspicions over the years watching the space. First of all, of course, lots of innocent Chinese students are caught in this. So that's something I have to say. Not everybody is from the Communist Party's hierarchy and, is got spying tasks. But at the same time, I do have this suspicion because lots of students going to the high end of the US universities are from of certain backgrounds, because in China, the rich families are almost exclusively of the cadres of the state, and the state are run by the Communist Party. So in a way, and this could be some type of messaging. For me, I think the US government, in its negotiation over its frustration dealing with the Chinese government, whether it's in the matter of trade or defense or peace and security in Asia Pacific, many things, but they may not be able to openly leverage on certain things. If tariffs didn't work, let's see, if your children are studying here, maybe I can use them. Like, that's my suspicion. Of course, I don't have any direct proof, but that's something I think it's worth thinking about.
Right. My final question to you, back to IOMed. The fact that, and I go back to the whole question of disputes, the fact that there are so many disputes that China is involved in, will there be red lines in this IOMed? Like, people cannot go take the issue of mediating peace on Taiwan, on any island in the South China Sea, or for that matter, an issue when it comes to India, Pakistan, particularly Taiwan. Would those be red lines for China?
I think because it's organized by China, it's run in Hong Kong, in the Chinese territory, and some of the things are just go without saying. And how many times, even in the United Nations, when there's a vote sponsored by China and France, and they would never touch on these things. So, it would be a surprise if they actually allow one of those challenges to go into that mediation. But
or
of
even
course,
Hong Kong, the question of Hong Kong, because it's not 2047 yet.
Not only that, we're seeing Hong Kong journalists, independent unions, one by one are disappearing.
Yes.
Even the dissidents who run away from Hong Kong, their family members are being detained in Hong Kong. So when they start to, talk about how Hong Kong is a showcase for rule of law, I guess many around the world would, have a bit of a laugh, at least, over the claim. But of course, it's a matter of perspective at the end of the day.
Howard Zhang, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Thank you.